Okay, so good evening and welcome everyone. We were going to have this session as a sort of spillover session where we can mostly address your questions, but depending on how many questions you have, I did also have a few things I wanted to say at the end, and then I thought we could also do the last of the four meditations that we're doing in this module, that on the precious human rebirth. But before we get into all that, then even though it's more of an informal session, we can start in the usual way. So to adjust our motivation, again, in a brief way, just to think that the purpose of my life is to benefit all sentient beings. And in order to benefit sentient beings in the best way, I must actualize my highest potential. Then and only then will I have all the skills, qualities, and knowledge to benefit others in the most effective way. And therefore, I'm going to participate in this session here today so I can learn about the methods to lead to enlightenment. Okay. And with that, yeah, maybe let's jump right in to questions, because if I start going, then it might take the whole time again. Yeah.
I had a question about the clear light nature of mind. Like I understand the mind is clear and knowing and reflects its object, and if it's accurately, perceiving it like it's a sense object, we're getting a correct perception of it, not like it's a rabbit horn. But why do when they use the words clear and the words light, like I think of light like luminance, like a light bulb. Like do they also, does that factor into the meaning of why they say clear light? Like is it luminous? Like is it luminous? The mind?
Yeah. So, okay, in this context that you're talking about, clear light mind, okay, then usually that is a explanation of the mind according to the Vajrayana, the tantric system, and that clear light mind. Well, the real one is the subtlemost mind, subtlemost consciousness that directly realizes emptiness. Okay. So they describe it in those words. For me to say that mind is, luminous, would require me to have actual experience of that, which unfortunately I don't. Okay.
I'm also like in the tradition, the saints and like Jesus, they all have halos around their heads. So, in the Buddha and like the Buddha and the different, like Nagarjuna, they have halos around their heads.
Yeah. So, okay. So what I was saying is, they, there are certain texts, and actually before we recite the Heart Sutra or other Perfection of Wisdom sutras, then usually there's a verse that we recite that says that Masam Jime Sherap Paro Chin. Okay. So Masam, sam is to think, and ma is a negation word. So it's kind of like the inconceivable, okay? Maj is the inexpressible. Sherap Paro Chin is the Prajaparamita. Okay. So at one level, and you'll see this also in the a lot of the Zen tradition, they keep saying that the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon, right? So the actual direct realization of emptiness, okay, is completely beyond our ordinary minds, right? And it's actually completely beyond expression in the sense that, just like we talked about eating an orange, right? Someone who's never done that, you can use all the words you want, but that's going to be nothing compared to actually handing them an orange and having them take a bite, right? So nonetheless, whereas in the Zen tradition, right, I I think I mentioned to you about the more senior monk who is helping me, who told me that there in the Zen monastery, they don't read books for the first 5-6 years. Here in the Tibetan tradition, and actually coming down from the Nalanda tradition with this great history of scholarship, then we do use words, we do use these texts to describe what's the actual realization is going to be. And that does help us, it's like, if we don't know where the moon is, the finger pointing there gives us some idea. And if we know how to use those descriptions well, we can get some idea. Of course, we eventually have to transcend the conceptual thoughts, the books, and in the Vajrakara Sutra, it even likens the Dharma to be like a raft. Whereas, if you're crossing a river, you use that raft, but once you get to the other side, then you leave your raft behind, right? So that all said, okay, though it's kind of on one level undescribable beyond all thought, in the traditional texts where they describe the clear light mind, okay, so even I think some of you know the 9-point, the death dissolution meditation, where we go through these different appearances we have at the time of death, right? So the last one, okay, we have the clear light of death, right? And there they're talking about it as being a kind of luminous, like the sky on a moonlit night, right? Where it's not like the halo, but some kind of background sort of luminosity. That's how it's described, okay? And but even that, it's yeah, probably yeah, I can't say. I don't have that experience. They say at that time of the clear light of death, for us ordinary beings, emptiness appears, okay? But normally we're not conscious enough to realize it and then therefore make use of it, right? But yogis, accomplished practitioners, they can, through the power of their meditation, and working with the channels, the drops, we did in the 9-round breathing meditation, we visualize those 3 channels, right? So that's actually preparing you later for some advanced practices where we actually try to make our energies go into the central channel. When that happens, then the more gross, coarse levels of mind do dissolve, and that leaves just the subtlemost clear light mind remaining. Okay. That's a preview for later. So anyway, the real answer is I don't know, but I've just spoken for about 10 minutes. Okay, but I hope that helped. Oh, and then your other point about the religious iconography having halos and so forth. So yeah, I mean, even in the description of the Buddha, they do say that the Buddha radiated light from his body, but that light, that's not the clear light, right? When we talk about the clear light mind, that is some actual physical radiance. So like that. Okay, but good question, thank you. I hope that helped a bit. See, one general thing that we all need to keep in mind is sometimes even the same kind of terms that will have different meaning in different contexts, right? So yeah, when we talk about clear and knowing, it means arising. Anything can arise in the mind. my thought is clear when we talk about the clear light mind, okay? I think that actually means emptiness. That's my hypothesis, clear in the clear light mind. Because at that mind, the real one is the direct realization of emptiness. And the direct realization of emptiness is clear, means free from appearances of true existence. Do you understand? So remember I was, oh, maybe not with this group, but I was mentioning right now, all of our sense consciousnesses, they have the appearance of true existence, right? Everything appears to be truly existent. Then even a conceptual realization of emptiness, it'll have an appearance of true existence. Only for a sentient being, means not a Buddha, only the direct realization of emptiness is unmistaken in its appearing object, you know? So anyway, I think clear means clear from, you know, appearance of true existence. Anyway, okay, sorry.
I think Sam had his hand up.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Thank you, Venerable, for your teaching this whole module. I have a question about a larger sort of topic that we've touched on a couple of times, where the teachings generally suggest that one experiences the teachings for themselves and to examine them, analyze them, so that it makes meaning for oneself rather than just taking them wholesale. Does that all sound correct?
Yes.
So thank you. So what is the mechanism by which a practitioner is meant to experience or examine some of the more esoteric teachings, or let's say to experience for themselves karma from past lives or that sort of thing, that aren't immediately accessible in the way that, like, meditating on dependent origination or other sort of more straightforward things would be more immediately accessible?
Yes, this is an excellent question. Yeah. Okay, so let me play back your question, right? So there is this it's actually found in the sutra, where His Holiness quotes this one sutra as saying, you know, just like a goldsmith would only purchase some gold after cutting it, rubbing it, and scorching it, so you too, you scholars and monks, should only adopt my teachings after thorough examination and not out of mere respect for me. Right? You might have heard His Holiness mention that quote. He does nearly every teaching he gives. So yeah, and further to the advice that we get from His Holiness about being a 21st century Buddhist, right? That the mere faith alone isn't enough. We have to use examination, right? So then we have a more esoteric type of teachings where it's very difficult to check. So actually, within the Buddhist framework, there are three levels of phenomena. Okay, we have the manifest phenomena, and these are phenomena that are directly perceivable by our sense consciousness, like you know, sounds and forms that we can see. And then we have hidden phenomena. So hidden phenomena are those that we cannot, when the first time we realize them, we cannot do it through a direct perception, but rather we have to rely on a reasoning consciousness, a conceptual consciousness, right? So the one we normally talk about is, you know, the fire on a distant mountain pass, right? We see the smoke, we cannot directly see the fire, but in reliance on the perception of smoke, we infer the existence of fire, right? But the fire is not directly appearing. Okay. So then we also have the extremely hidden phenomena. Okay, so between the I'm sorry, between the hidden phenomena, we have the slightly hidden phenomena, and then the extremely hidden phenomena. Okay, and so the slightly hidden phenomena is like the fire. Okay, where we can know, just they call it through reasoning, through power of the fact. We know there's a relationship between smoke and fire. We see the smoke, therefore we can infer fire. Okay, but then the extremely hidden phenomena, these are things like when you see in sutra, and some of these stories appear in the Lam Rim, where in the sutra there are occasions when something very strange happens. Okay, and the people, like for example, there was one time when a palace caught fire, and 49 of the people got burned to death, but one was able to escape. Okay, so the people go to the Buddha afterwards, and they ask the Buddha, "Oh, how were you able to? What were the karmic causes that enabled this one person to escape?" And the Buddha told this story about how in the past they were a family, and there was a wedding, and at the wedding they wanted to serve, I think it was, I don't know, some beef dish perhaps, and one person in that family objected, and didn't want to kill this animal for the feast, but of course she lost. Right? In any case, due to that karma, right, the family, 49 people then were killed, and the one was able to escape. Okay, so this type of phenomena, okay, it's an extremely hidden phenomena. And why? Because in order to realize this, we have to rely on the Buddha's testimony, right? There actually is no way that we can realize that very, very subtle hidden phenomena, okay, without the Buddha's testimony. Okay, so that puts us at a bit difficult point, because how then do we check those, right? All right, so in this context, the great Indian master Aryadeva said that through the understanding the teachings on emptiness, then I generate faith in your other teachings. Okay, so the teachings on emptiness, and emptiness, by the way, is a slightly hidden phenomena. Okay, we don't believe in emptiness, or we don't have to take Buddha's word for that. Those reasonings on emptiness are reasoning by power of the fact, as I mentioned. And when we think, like you mentioned, about the what dependent origination means, then we see the relationship between dependent origination and emptiness. Okay, and dependent origination means it depends on other phenomena, therefore they're not independent, therefore they're not established from their own side. Then we get some knowledge of that. Okay, so then the other more hidden phenomena, okay, now this takes a little bit of a stretch, but even in the second chapter of Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika, I think, have some of you heard of that? Dharmakirti, great Indian master, he wrote this text Pramanavartika on which is basically on logic and epistemology. And in the second chapter of that, it was actually to prove through reasoning why the Buddha is a valid source of refuge. Okay, and basically the structure of that text, and that's the source where it gets into the logical reasoning to establish the past and future lives. Okay, and then well, first it actually denies the existence of a creator God. Then it establishes the existence of past and future lives. Okay, because the point is, for the Buddha became Buddha from having been like us, unenlightened being, then through this process of training, attained enlightenment. Okay, so Dharmakirti is saying, okay, well, how does that happen? Okay, so first is having to explain that, you know, this kind of perfect being wasn't perfect from the beginning, like a God creature or, you know, godlike being would be, but rather was imperfect, then became perfect, right? So first, no perfection from the beginning. Okay, then second, well, how is this possible? Because our mind continues from life to life, and therefore we keep continuing to develop. So he had to establish past and future lives. Then the third was establishing how our conceptual mind can become a direct perceiver, right? So first we realize emptiness, you know, conceptually. Then through continued meditation, we get a direct perceiver. Then through that direct perceiver, you know, we gradually abandon the afflictions and you know, attain enlightenment. Okay, so that's one way of reasoning. But then it's very interesting. Toward the end of the second chapter, you know, he says, okay, yang na. Okay, so he goes stanzas through stanzas, establishing Buddha is a valid source of refuge. Okay, so yang na means or, yeah, or. Okay, so it's like I don't know, maybe 170 stanzas establishing. Then he says, yang na, okay, so or, you know, the Buddha is a valid source of refuge because he taught the Four Noble Truths. Okay, wow, amazing. So then he goes on to establish from the other side the Four Noble Truths, right? And especially the truth of, you know, cessation and the truth of the path leading to the cessation, right? Through, you know, because the Four Noble Truths are there and are established by reasoning, and the Buddha taught those Four Noble Truths in an unmistaken way, right? Then we know something about, you know, his compassion for sentient beings, and then we come to know that he's, you know, reliable. And then we think, okay, well, if he's reliable about these things, which are directly sort of relevant to our path of liberation, then these other statements about subtle workings of karma, then we can generate some belief in him. Okay. Now, even that is, in my mind, right? You know, and I studied Western philosophy in undergrad, and you know, we have inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning, right? So that is actually an example of inductive reasoning, right? Where inductive reasoning would be like, oh, the sun rose today, the sun rose yesterday, the sun rose the day before. Well, the sun will rise tomorrow, right? Basically, right? Oh, the Buddha, he told the truth about the Four, you know, Noble Truths. You know, he told the truth about this. Oh, therefore, everything he says is therefore valid. But we actually know that even for the Buddha's pronouncements, all of them cannot be taken literally, right? So he taught, you know, the other tenet systems, the mind-only school, for example, right? So he said that too, right? So then it's a bit more like, okay, well, how does that fit into things? And so here, even those philosophical viewpoints of the mind-only school, those can be refuted through reasoning also, and reasoning by power of the fact. And this is what Nagarjuna and Asanga and the other masters were doing. You know, Chandrakirti, they were, you know, sort of interpreting the Buddhist words in the sutras, and you know, amongst the three turnings of the wheel, differentiating which of the Buddhist statements were definitive and which were interpretable, right? And through that, the main ones they were focusing on were emptiness, the teachings on ultimate reality. And so for us now, I'll say this, that, you know, the Four Noble Truths, emptiness, all that, that's the directly relevant and most important thing for our path. These other extremely hidden phenomena about that story of the 49 people getting burned, okay, whether that's true or not, or whether that's just a story, right? Okay, it doesn't matter, right? The extremely hidden phenomena are only the very, very, very subtle workings of karma, which is like for example, in this case, or in other cases where there's a specific event that happens, and what specific karmic deed did I do in which life, under which circumstance, that has led to me experiencing this today, right? But the general workings of karma, that from negative actions comes suffering, then that is not extremely hidden. They say that is only slightly hidden. And yeah, so that's there. But for us now, to make it very practical, when we get these bits of advice about checking the teachings for ourselves, I think it's most important with the Four Noble Truths, the teachings on emptiness, thinking about the ultimate view from let's say the mind-only school versus the autonomy school versus the consequentialist school, these things, and that we can get some taste of, right? Yeah. So again, I'm not sure. That's what I think. I'm not sure how well I answered, but
It's really helpful, Venerable. Thank you so much
Okay.
for your answer. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Does anyone
Anything
else
else?
have a
Yeah.
question? The three turnings, I don't think we've touched on that. So I think maybe some people are a little bit confused.
Oh, yeah. Well, basically, okay, without getting into that too much, we were saying that why do we need to be enlightened, right? Because when we're enlightened, we have the omniscient mind. We have the omniscient mind, which allows us to see all individuals' kind of dispositions, their level of mind, right? Their karma, their level of intelligence, and like this. And so the very, very subtlest teachings on emptiness, according to the Prasangika school, is that nothing, is established from its own side, right? Everything is merely labeled by the mind, right? And so some people, when they think about that, it blows their mind, right? Like we were saying in the Zen koan, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, doesn't make a sound, right? Okay. So anyway, maybe we can talk about that later. But for some people, it's like, of course, it makes a sound. Okay. Or, if they think, let's not get into that right now. If they think that things are merely labeled by the mind, okay, and don't have some essential objective existence from their own side, then they can't make sense of how things exist, full stop, right? If things are just merely labeled by my mind, they think it's all a mere projection. And then I could call, this cup, I could call it an elephant, oh, and I'm holding up an elephant in one hand, right? Oh, it's just merely labeled by my mind. So for them, the kind of the normal workings of the world would then fall apart, and they would fall into nihilism. So for these people, then the Buddha taught that no, actually there is inherent existence, there is true existence, there is objective existence. Okay. So later, in other teachings, he then refutes inherent existence. So if you're just looking at the sutras, you'll see in one, oh, there is inherent existence. You'll see in another, there's no inherent existence. And then we can get confused. The Buddha contradicted himself. So the point is, for different disciples at different times with different levels of mind, then he would teach things that are not definitive, but had a specific purpose. For those people who thought that if there's no inherent existence, then nothing could exist at all, then he taught actually that you are inherently existent, right? You are inherently existent. So that means you exist. And since you exist, you're going to, experience the effects of your own actions, right? You are going to, the inherently existent you is going to go into an inherently existent future life. So take care of your karma, abandon negative deeds, right? And so those people, starting off on the path, then were equipped with what they need to, turn around their actions. And then gradually they're led to more subtle points of view. The Buddha, again, gradually let them in on it, like, oh, hey, remember when I told you everything's inherently existent? Well, take a seat. So anyway, that's a little bit about, the three turnings of the wheel just means, they all had different intended disciples, right? And then those three turning the wheel, right? They had different levels of subtlety in their philosophical viewpoint. So, like that.
Anybody else have a question? I think we're clear.
Really? Wait, someone last week, who was it? They said they had a question, and it was like a larger question, so they wanted more time to talk about it. Right? Who's that?
That would be me.
Oh, yes. Okay.
I have a follow-up question to the three turnings of the wheel. I
Okay.
understand that the answer you just gave was that conceptually there were three versions of Buddhist teachings. But literally, what does that mean, the three turnings of the wheel? I mean, were there three sets of teachings like in time, or are there three different sutras, or I don't know what the answer will be, but something along those lines.
Yes. So again, this is a really good question, and a question that even has a lot of debate amongst the Tibetan scholars. So I'll follow. Okay. If you have been tuning into His Holiness teachings, okay, then he always mentions this one great text by Lama Tsongkhapa. I think it's translated as Essence of Eloquence. Essence of Eloquence. Okay. So His Holiness, he always is raving about this text. It's the one where he talks about one of his friends, who's a Sanskrit scholar in Varanasi, who has read all of Nagarjuna and all the great Indian scholars in the original Sanskrit, and then they've actually translated this Essence of Eloquence text by Lama Tsongkhapa. It's now available in Hindi, and His Holiness asked him, "Oh, you have read all of Nagarjuna and Aryadeva, all those great Indian masters, and now you've read Lama Tsongkhapa. So how does Lama Tsongkhapa's text stack up relative to the great Indian masters?" And His Holiness reports that his friend says, "Oh, well, it not only is on par, but it could even exceed. It perhaps exceeds even the great Indian masters." Okay. Anyway, bit of advertising about that text. Anyway, in that text, this is one of the central themes that Lama Tsongkhapa talks about, is how then do we differentiate these three turnings of the wheel, and which are definitive and which are interpretable. Okay. And so it sounds like, because we talk first turning of the wheel, second turning of the wheel, third turning of the wheel, then some of the earlier Tibetan scholars talked about it in terms of time sequence, in chronological order. So especially because the first teaching he gave in Sarnath, it belongs to the first turning of the wheel, right? So then people can think, oh, well, it's, the Buddha, he was enlightened at age 35. He lived until he was 80. So what is that, 55 years? No, 45 years? 45 years. So, 15, 15, 15. Okay, done. But Lama Tsongkhapa, he refutes that. And so how we actually differentiate, okay, the three turnings of the wheel is by its subject matter. And in particular, the presentation on the ultimate view of reality, okay? So even more, not all of the teachings fall into one of those three turnings of the wheel, okay? For example, in some of the pronouncements that the Buddha gave on Vinaya and some of the monastic rules, the common example that Tsongkhapa uses is there's a rule that the monks should wear their lower robes evenly, okay? Right. So the Buddha said it, but Tsongkhapa says this doesn't belong to any of the three turnings of the wheel because it's not talking about the philosophical view of emptiness. He's not saying wear your inherently existent robes straight. Okay, do you understand? So to answer your question very kind of succinctly, then, so it's not that at the beginning of a sutra, the Buddha then said, "Okay, guys, this is now first turning of the wheel." Okay, it is, later. Actually, that's not quite true. There is one sutra, right? And it's called Dode Gondrel in Tibetan. It's a sutra illuminating the thought, okay? So in that sutra, I think it's sorry, I only know the Tibetan, but there's a bodhisattva, Dundam Yangpa, okay? It's like the ultimate exalted one. Okay, anyway. So he asks the Buddha, in Varanasi, you taught that all phenomena have characteristics. And then, later, you taught that no phenomena have characteristics. And, the Buddha is without characteristic, without contradiction. So when you said all phenomena have characteristics, what did you mean? When you said they don't have any characteristics, what did you mean? Okay. And his answer to that question then formed the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, right? Where, and those first two then were the first two turnings of the wheel of Dharma. The first one being that no phenomena has characteristics. The second, the first, all phenomena have characteristics. The second, no phenomena has characteristics. Those then, became the basis for the classification into the three turnings of the wheel, right? But then it was only, quite later, in Tibet, really, where this idea gained more sort of commentary and attention. Anyway, does that answer your question?
Yes, it answers it in a way that I think in the future I'll have better understanding, because it's obviously a deeper subject.
Yeah. For now, just know that the three turnings, it's not differentiated by chronological order. It's differentiated by subject matter, and in particular, the subject of emptiness. the ultimate view of reality.
Excellent. So my
Okay.
question that I had last week referred to
Hmm.
some of the readings, and
Great.
so in the wish fulfilling golden sun, I know there are different versions of it, but I'm going to refer to the pages 44 through 50, which have the meditations that we're doing, and
Okay.
I think that's what our reading is supposed to be about. Meditation 1. So the first one is perfect human rebirth, and then there's a continuity of consciousness. But anyway, I think the human rebirth one is the one that we read here. And in the beginning, it talks about the 8 freedoms and 10 receptacles and different points, I guess, when thinking about the human rebirth. What's a good way to use that in meditation? For example, do we just focus on one and then rotate the different points and think about that, or what is your suggestion for that?
Oh, great. This is actually, I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to do the meditation on precious human rebirth. So we'll do it later this session. But in general, that type of meditation is what we call analytic meditation. So in general, of the 2 main categories of meditation, we have placement meditation, where we take our mind and we just place it on one object and try not to let it waver to other objects. But the second kind is this analytic meditation, where we try to use reasoning, analysis to arrive at a certain conclusion. And this meditation on the precious human rebirth is an analytic meditation. So what we would do is those outlines you have there, the 8 freedoms, the 10 endowments, and then it goes on into the 3 reasons why the precious human rebirth is rare, and the 3 reasons why it's precious. So in the meditation session, what you would do is just go through those outlines, and don't do too much in one session. But for this topic of the precious human rebirth, you would, in your first session, just start with 1, right? And the first one is the being free from being reborn as a hell being. Okay. So first you would think about what it would be like to be reborn as a hell being, and think of the various sufferings you would experience, and in particular think how difficult it would be to practice Dharma at that time if you were in such a state. And then you sort of meditate until you get a feeling like till it really hits your heart. Oh man, if I were reborn like that, I could not practice. Okay. It should fill you with some sense of dread. Okay, so you use the reasoning consciousness to arrive at a conclusion. Then when you arrive at that conclusion, you let it sink into your heart, or into your mind, so it has some lasting impact. Okay. All right, you do that. If you have a lot of time, after that sort of mini realization is there for a while, it will fade away, right? You might get distracted, so you can conjure it up again, however many times you can in your session. Then you finish, and then you move on to the next, saying, oh well, actually now I'm not reborn as a hell being. Okay. Wow. Okay. So then thinking, since I'm not reborn as a hell being, what tremendous opportunity I have to practice. And then you get this great sort of joy. Wow, amazing. Okay. Then you continue to conjure up that feeling. And then sort of at the conclusion of your session, you would say, oh, now that I have the precious freedom of this rebirth where I'm not born as a hell being, I'm going to make best use of it. Okay. Come up with that conclusion, that firm determination, and then you can end your session. Now, day 2, you would do a similar thing, but now move on to the second of the 8 freedoms. Freedom from being reborn as a hungry ghost, right? Do the kind of same thing, keep going through. So the point here is with these analytical meditations, you're going to be going through those outlines in a very slow and deliberate way, not trying to do too much in one session. And then gradually you go through all the topics. But you, by not doing too much in one session, you really sort of focus on one and can have a better impact on the mind. Okay, but anyway, we're gonna get into that more, and at the end of this session, we're gonna hopefully do one meditation on this. Does that help?
Thank you very much. It helps immensely, Venerable. I'm done. Thank you.
I've seen a couple of wrinkled brows. Claudia or Anya, do you have any questions?
I just feel a little overwhelmed. I'm just trying to soak it in. It's going to take some time of practice. I'm so overwhelmed, I don't even have a question.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No problem. We're in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
There's something in the chat from Lakshmi. She says on page 83, if anyone was wondering. I'm not sure what that refers to.
Okay.
Mary Ellen, it's in the chat box that it's referring to the perfect human rebirth.
Yeah, okay, I see that. There are a couple of copies of the precious, the wish fulfilling golden sun.
Well,
Page numbers are out of sync, so that's where perfect human rebirth is.
Could I ask a question?
okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering if you could speak to the progression from a conceptual realization to a direct, valid perception. How does that work?
Yeah. So this doesn't happen for just any phenomena, right? This is only like for example, the fire on the faraway mountain pass. It's not that we continue to meditate, there's fire, and then we get the real appearance of fire. It's only for emptiness, impermanence. So if you've studied Lorik before, there are these what we call the yogic direct perceiver. Okay. So with these yogic direct perceivers, it says that they're the uncommon empowering condition. Okay. More terminology, but what this basically means is, it's cause, an uncommon cause, a necessary prerequisite is that you have shine or shamatha, or the calm abiding mind, right? And so here, what that means is, we were talking about placement meditation, where you place your mind on one object. Okay. So as you develop your concentration, then you'll get to a point where you can hold your mind on its object for basically as long as you want, hours on end, even days, actually. And not only do you have perfect concentration, it has utter clarity. Not only that, but your mind and body is conjoined with bliss. Okay. They call it physical pliancy and mental pliancy. So pliancy, it's like, being able to be kind of molded, shaped, bent. So that means you have utter kind of control over the mind. Okay. Now, we were talking about analytic meditation, right? So analytic meditation by default is a kind of discursive meditation where we're thinking about different reasonings, right? So when we start to have discursive meditation, analytic meditation, our mind is entertaining more than one thought, right? We're having a kind of series of reasonings. So at that time, we're not single pointedly focused. We're going through different lines of reasoning. Okay. But if we were to attain shamatha, okay, we normally do it, let's say we can do it on the breath, or more common to also use like an image of Buddha we visualize in the space in front, right? Then we've achieved shamatha. We say, okay, now I'm going to meditate on emptiness. Our shamatha, our calm abiding mind, will degenerate a bit when we start to analyze emptiness. But at a certain point, then even our analysis isn't going to disturb our concentration. Okay. Then we have what's called the union of calm abiding and special insight. Okay. But even that can still be a conceptual one. So with repeated meditation, right, on this union of calm abiding and special insight, then it's said with sufficient practice, with sufficient merit, then it will kind of transform into a direct perception. But again, here, what that is like is hidden to me because I've not done it yet, right? But that's how it's sort of described in the text. And I'm realizing, yeah, that's quite a maybe a bit off from where we all are now. But anyway, maybe we can leave it at that. Okay. Okay. Anything else at this point? All right. So I wanted to just have some more general remarks, and then we can do our meditation. So this is the first module in a 14 module, 2-year plus program. And I know many of you have different levels of experience. And so, Jan was feeling a bit overwhelmed, or no, Claudia, sorry. I was feeling a bit overwhelmed. That's natural, that's okay. Because there is a lot of material that we're going to go through. So what we were trying to do in this first module is, get a sort of overview of things, get us into a nice daily meditation practice. And as it is, this analogy is in the sutra, but even a large vessel, you add drop by drop and eventually it becomes full, right? So similarly, with our practice, with our knowledge, with our merit, it's going to be like that. So every day, we just keep adding our drops. Now, how we do that, we have our few drops of meditation, and then it's also good to, when we do the required reading, to have a little bit every day, and then not just read and leave it at that, but do the contemplation, and think about what the author was saying, what points were made, and then think if there's any questions that we have, whether they be vocabulary words, whether they be certain concepts that are not clear. And then when we come to these sessions, we can discuss your questions. Okay. Then we have a kind of self-assessment. We're not calling it an exam. Self-assessment coming up, right? And for those, Mary Ellen had sent out that the subject area summary sheets, right? And all those bullets. So then, although there's so many concepts that we discussed in this module, then it'd be good for all of you just to, for each bullet point, can you explain in a sort of simple way what that is talking about, what we discussed? Okay. So then just do that. Don't look at your books, and just to think, okay, what was the definition of mind? Okay, clear and knowing. What does clear refer to in this context? Okay, what does knowing refer to in this context? And have just a kind of basic idea of all the points that we should have covered. Okay, and especially, yeah, I like to do this when I study. Is you put yourself in my shoes, okay? And you think, okay, if I were the teacher, and now I'm going to assess the students if they have gotten the main points about what we covered in this module, okay? What are the self-assessment questions I would ask? Right? And I'm not going to ask some kind of trick question, right? But the main points, okay? And think about, what will the main kind of questions for a self-assessment be? And then make sure you're able to answer those well. Okay. Then, that's one thing I wanted to say. So then when I was just looking through those subject area summary sheets, it's always a trick. And we saw that even in today's session, where one of the great challenges of teaching in a group like this, where there are different experience levels, is that, some people, they've already been studying for so many years. And, like Mary's question on the clear light mind, which is basically when we get that clear light mind, we're going to become Buddha very, very quickly. If any of you get that clear light mind in this life, the very latest you'll achieve full enlightenment, means you'll achieve Buddhahood, is at the time of your bodily death. And instead of going into the bardo, you will achieve enlightenment as you get that clear light of death. Okay, so that's such a advanced realization. But some of you've read different things, you have had different experiences, and then those are the questions that come to your mind. Okay, and that's fine. And I want to, I heard once Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche praises his teaching style as like, being a buffet, right? And in a buffet, maybe you don't like everything there, but you can find something that you like, right? So similarly, I'm trying to lay out a buffet for all of you with different experience levels. And so for the more advanced ones, I do want to give those little snippets into some more advanced topics, but I also don't want to, have the more newer students go hungry, right? So anyway, so now when I was looking through those subject summaries myself, there's that topic about the past and future lives, the mind is not the brain, and this in itself is a huge topic. I was actually curious whether we would have more questions on this today. And so in my own kind of journey, this is still a big kind of unresolved question. It's very hard to understand. It's definitely not something that I've realized, the existence of past and future lives, right? So if you wanted to dive more into it, then I think it's good to at this point, because especially when you start meeting some of your family members, right? And they come to know that you're learning about Buddhism. This whole concept of past and future lives is not in the normal sort of Western conceptual paradigm, right? So you might get questions about it. So for me, right, since we're talking about mind and its potential, one thing that helped me a lot in my journey from the beginning, I think I mentioned I first got interested in yoga before I got interested in Buddhism. But I read this book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, right? Have some of you heard of this? So in that book, it was so eye-opening to me, because it talks about all these clairvoyances and all these other amazing things out there, right? So when we talk about mind and its potential, even reading something like that, these biographies of great yogis, practitioners, it can open up our mind to different possibilities about our own potential, about what life can be like, right? Because otherwise, the normal thought we have about our potential is, what are the articles we read? Retire early, start your own business, like all these things is very worldly, or like maybe get six-pack abs, like these are the the kind of goals that we are that are kind of given to us by our society, and we don't think more than these kind of worldly things. So that can be very good to just open our mind to other things. And then about the gaining some understanding or even entertaining the possibility of past and future lives. Basically now, without getting into it too much, there is the concept of scientific materialism, which basically equates the mind with the brain. And since there is no mind separate from the brain, at our bodily death, our brain ceases to function, then that's it. Okay. So actually, now even within science, there is some re-examination of this strict scientific materialism. And it can be very interesting if those of you who want to dive into this deeper. But I have my, maybe some extra reading for you. But there's this great book that came out, Irreducible Mind. But just check that out, okay? So I didn't want to make this assigned reading in your first, thing here, in your first module. But if you are more kind of inclined to get into it, it talks about a lot of different points of view on this. So rather than talking about past and future lives, just in itself, then I think it can be useful to evaluate the entire, reasons for the scientific materialistic viewpoint and the reasons against it. And, there's other phenomena that are now being studied around, near-death experiences, right? Where people, before they die, or, they go into surgery, and they're able, as it were, to see the operating room. And there's one instance, again, it's just an anecdotal story, but someone went into surgery, and during the surgery, I think the doctor took off his watch and put it like under the table there. And then the person came out of surgery, and the doctor was there, and I think the person was like, "Oh, did you find your watch? It was under the table." And the doctor went and found it and was completely amazed. So this, and there's other stories where, in the normal scientific worldview, this would be impossible, right? Also remote viewing, right? I don't know if any of you, if you're not into these kind of really scholarly books, there's a great book, Extraordinary Knowing. I forget who the author is. She was a professor at Stanford University, and she goes into all these kind of, PSI kind of events, like what we normally consider ESP or remote viewing. Anyway, when we think about these things and come to learn about them, that are totally impossible under the scientific worldview, the materialistic worldview, then it can kind of open our minds to say, okay, let me examine the evidence on both sides of this, and at least get to a point where we have to, even before we get that realization, we have to operate to the best of our ability, given the knowledge and level of understanding that we have, right? So if those concepts of Buddha nature, and like as Anne brought up, a conceptual consciousness turning into a direct perceiver, and us becoming fully enlightened, all those things seem so far away. What we can know now is, all right, there is some experience that we have where when we meditate, then our mind changes. Okay, and before we were unconcentrated, and we get a little bit more concentrated. Before we had more impatience, and now we're a bit more patient. Okay, so for us, that's great. That's enough. And that shows at least some potential for the mind to change, to grow, to develop. Then, that later, okay, whether I'm going to get direct realization, all right, we can leave that for later. But for now, in our path, okay, are we a better person now than we were 6 months ago? Okay, and then to know how our practice of meditation is enabling that transformation, that growth. And for us, that's great. That's something we can experience. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. I have a few other books here, if that is interesting for you, this whole scientific worldview. And yeah. Oh yes, Elizabeth Lloyd Mayer. So one, this is also interesting. I'm not just a nerd, so this is not the only thing that I'm saying, but this is a nice one too. Dogs that know when their owners are coming home, right? This person, Rupert Sheldrake, he actually has some videos on YouTube, right? So he's done a lot of research about this. I think he has another book, Science Set Free. And one thing that he's researched is this thought of, people have a sense when someone is behind them staring at them, right? So how is this possible in the, with scientific worldview? But this is one of the things where, like, it is statistically significant, and demonstrated again and again that people do have this sense of when, they're being watched. Anyway, he goes into these other things, but anyway, so that's one. And then there's a psychiatrist at UCLA, Jeffrey Schwartz. He has written a book, Your Mind is Not Your Brain. And he talks about how the, what we think about can actually influence how our brain is. So this concept of neuroplasticity. So that can be interesting for some of you to think about as well. And then another book here, Brain Wars, Mario Beauregard, a French Canadian. He wrote that, Brain Wars. Anyway, there's a whole lot in there. If that's not interesting to you, you don't have to get into it. But if it is, then there's a lot to study and read about. So anyway, I'm mentioning all of this because I saw in those subject area sheets that those are topics, and I didn't go into it so much because I didn't want to bog you down, but I also wanted to allow those of you who are interested to go into it in more detail. All right, so that's it. Let us now do a bit of meditation on the precious human rebirth. And then just to set the stage for later, I'll mention now, so then we can just kind of end with a meditation and get all the nuts and bolts out of the way. But we're supposed to have these one-day practice sessions where we do more concentrated meditation practice. So in talking to Mary Ellen, we decided that it would be better to just keep this time, right? So for the next 2 weeks, we'll have mini kind of meditation practice sessions. So there's 4 meditations that we're supposed to do in this module. So next week, we'll get together at the same time and do 2 of those meditations, have a little bit of question and answer, and make sure you guys know how to do those meditation practices. And then the following week, we will do the other 2. Okay? So we thought it'd be easier than to try to schedule something on the weekend, because people have different schedules and all that. Okay? And then we'll also have that assessment. So that's coming up. We'll do that after the meditation sessions. Okay? So in the meantime, if you haven't finished all the reading, please do. And as I mentioned, think about what the likely questions would be on that assessment and prepare yourself for that. And in the following 2 weeks, when we have our meditation, then if you have questions, we will have time to entertain those as well. Okay? Terrific. All right, so let's meditate. So even though we're doing this analytic meditation on the precious human rebirth, we always start in the usual way, getting into a comfortable meditation posture. And then just taking a moment, we've gone over a lot of topics. Maybe the mind is, racing with various thoughts. So we connect with our bodies again to let that mental energy dissipate. So again, focusing on the fact that we are now sitting, feeling the pressure of the seat on the lower parts of our body. And even if we don't do the 9-round breathing, then it can be useful just to take some intentionally deep breaths at the beginning. So just at your own pace, just breathe in nice and slow. And then exhale completely. You can think that all of the distraction, all of the mental afflictions, as you breathe out, they leave your body, they leave your lungs in the aspect of black smoke. And with each subsequent breath, as you exhale, those get further and further away, dissipating into the sky. And then just relax and settle into a more natural rhythm of breathing. So not trying to control the breath, but just letting it breathe, letting the breath breathe. Again, honing in on those sensations in the body as you breathe in and out, wherever they may manifest for you. Okay, now after we've developed some level of calmness and focus, you can switch to our analytic meditation. So here, rather than going through those 18 factors, then, just consider your life right now and consider that you have this opportunity to practice. So for that to happen, so many different causes and conditions had to come together. You would need to have lived in a time and a place where you have access to the teachings. So these are some outer conditions. So the Buddha appeared, the Buddha taught, those teachings still exist. You have access to the teachings because they've been translated into languages that you understand. You have access to teachers that impart the teachings. Then you also have the level of freedom that, one, you have the free time to pursue the teachings. These teachings are not outlawed in the countries that you live in. You have interest in the teachings, you don't just dismiss them out of hand. You have sufficient intelligence to read and understand and try to put them into practice. So just think about all these different factors that have come together that enable you to be here right now, engaging in trying to put into practice these methods. And so maybe, of all those that you're now thinking about, then choose one that sort of hits you, means the most to you right now, and go into a more deeper contemplation on just that one factor. So again, first thinking, what that factor is, then thinking, if you didn't have that, how difficult or maybe even impossible it would be for you to practice. So thinking about it in different ways, when you reach that conclusion, oh, if my life were different in that way, I would be unable to practice. When you arrive at that conclusion, then hold your mind there. Let your mind sink into that. So now, think that, well, although it would be impossible or difficult if you didn't have that condition, you actually do have that condition, have that as a part of your life that enables you to practice so well. So thinking about it in that way, then generate that feeling of joy that you have something so precious. You have that conducive factor. When you arrive at that conclusion, also let your mind sink into it. And now we can conclude. Just think, now that you have this and other conducive conditions that make it possible for you to practice, that you will make the best use of them, will make the best use of your life to progress along the path to lasting happiness, peace, freedom, and enlightenment. Okay, so gently come out of your meditation. So you understand what we're trying to do with that analytic meditation? Okay, great. All right, we can dedicate. So please think that due to the positive energy that we've created in our time here today, may all descending beings, vastest of vastness of space, quickly be freed from all of their suffering and attain the state of enlightenment. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank all of you as well, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.
Venerable.
Thank you, Venerable and Mary Ellen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.